Hello and welcome all back to Election Time News America. Today is Tuesday, July 22nd, 2025. We're going to be looking at the 2026 House map, which is going to really be an interesting one, especially with potential redrawings. As of right now, we're just going to be going based off of the current maps, what we have on this delightful projection right here. And so, especially in California, it's going to be a bit confusing because, especially down in Los Angeles, there's a few shy red ones. But here is the general, more competitive map for heading into 2026, with most of the safer races are in there already. And we're doing the four scale, which is going to be safe, likely, lean, and tilt, just to keep things simple. And so now we're going to be looking into the general information on how the Democrats could best pick up the House. We're also going to be doing a video on how they can pick up the Senate soon as well. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. I'll be looking into the results of the Tasmanian election once that's more certified by the Tasmanian Election Commission. And so also make sure to follow the Substack where I write longer form informational stuff if you're interested in that. And so also there's Threads, Twitter slash X, Instagram, where I put more quicker snippets of information on there as well. Remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So now looking at our map here is basically leaves the 159 House seats that could, in theory, flip. Now, there's still a few more on here that are more likely than not to stay with one party or the other. You have a few in, California that are very unlikely to move. Like that one, for example, it was two Republicans, so that says enough about that. That was 30-point margin. So there's a few not very competitive districts in here still, but for the most part, this is a non-competitive map of the 2026 midterms in the House. And so here's where we're going to be starting with right now. The Democrats are currently with a slim minority, with 5 seats. In matter of fact, it's actually so close that if Democrats had managed to literally hold on to their seat here by, any margin at all, 48.52, then it would have stayed there. And then they keep these two in Pennsylvania, for example. Those two, if they had managed to not lose those, then we would be in a much different situation, and the Democrats would currently have a House majority. So those three were actually the smallest margins out of all of them. If we look at the current station right here, how it is right now, this is actually the narrowest House margin. They actually did gain a net of 2 seats. But here, the majority was decided by just over 7,000 votes across 3 congressional districts. Now they did update it. Iowa's first, Colorado's eighth, and Pennsylvania seventh out of nearly 148 million cast. So that is going to be it's going to be in the first district, the seventh, Pennsylvania's seventh district, which is the one down here, the southern part, and then Colorado's eighth. So all of those were very, very close. So that just shows how slim of a majority that Republicans are going off of right now. But so it's going to be relatively easy for the Democrats to be able to take this majority, especially if they control their messaging well, which is something that they generally don't do. But Trump's disapproval rating is currently relatively high. It jumped all the way up to negative 6.6. We have continued worsening approval ratings, especially after the current Epstein scandal, where we have only 17% of American adults approve of Trump's handling of the issue, 54% disapprove. And even amongst Republicans, it's 35, 35, 30. From Quinnipiac, we have 71% of independents that disapprove of the way the Trump administration has handled the Jeffrey Epstein files. So that is a huge blow because independents are absolutely what handed the elections, all three main elections, towards the Republicans. And the generic congressional ballot isn't looking much better either. We'll be getting to that in a minute. Direction of the country is continuing to worsen. It is now at minus 11.3. And so also HR 1, One Big Beautiful Bill, had a somewhat large majority, almost a supermajority, 60% of adults that opposed it. So, and that also did, of course, pass. The generic congressional ballot, we have plus 2.5 for Real Clear polling, and this is 3.2 from Decision Desk HQ. Atlas Intel's most recent poll was D plus 8.6. They were the most accurate top-line pollster for the 2024 cycle. So Republicans might be in some trouble here, but how could the Democrats actually go about taking the House majority? The easiest way would be most likely that there's three main options that they have. The first one is going to be what I call the Pennsylvania strategy. What I'd call there were 3 seats, which is how much they lost by, that were under 2 points in 2024. The 8th and the 7th flipped, and the 10th, which is continually left trending. Cumberland County, which is this one right here, is one of the only left trending counties in the entire state from 2020 to 2024. So that's another sign that they could be able to hold on to it. All of these are safe blue. These are safe red. Now, they also have Fitzpatrick, who was one of 2 Republicans that voted against H.R. 1. He might be able to do relatively well. I expect that he shouldn't have much of difficulty being able to potentially hold on. Probably not by that much. Back in 2018, he only held on by 2.5 points. But I don't expect him to lose, even if it gets relatively bad for the Republicans later into the cycle. But also, the Republicans are battling the pattern that basically every single midterm, the party in power loses seats. In 2018, the first time that Trump was in office, Republicans lost 41 seats in the House of Representatives. So they're also battling that general fight as well. Plus, what we've seen so far in trends, 2025, Matt Gaetz district, Florida's first district. You look down here, he won by 32 in 2024. But if we look in 2025, that was a much narrower margin of just over 14 points. That's 14.6. Mike Waltz, he won in 2024 by 33.1. And here we have a 14-point victory for Randy Fine. So those are very much closer numbers than the Republicans would also want to see. And so that's going to complicate things. I'm going to eventually get this set up. But it's going to definitely complicate things a bit more than the Republicans might want. So that's going to mainly be the first possibility, is going to be just flipping those 3 in Pennsylvania. But that does mean they're going to have to hold on to every single other district that they have so far, which does include a few more competitive ones. So that's going to be somewhat difficult for them to be able to hold on to. Then we also have the Tour of the Southwest, which is going to be taking out all of these weaker districts in Colorado, which has been trending very hard to the left, holding on in New Mexico, and also Arizona, where there were three seats that were under 10 points. This one's probably the one that's going to hold on the strongest, but in 2018, this area did flip blue, so it is absolutely possible. But taking Siscomani's seat, Schweikert's seat, potentially big since he is retired, that could be a potential flip opportunity as well. Arizona's second. That's only 13 points. So this is probably the one they will not be able to flip, period. In theory, you could have an almost entirely blue Arizona come next November. Then you could also break down Colorado. All of these districts could flip blue since the reddest one was only by 13.8%. That was the 5th district. That's absolutely within flipping distance. In 2018, you actually had a district flip from R plus 8.3 all the way to 11.2. That's 19 points. That is more than enough to flip that district. Then you also have a few districts in California. Assuming that they don't redistrict it in and of itself, you could flip Valadeo, seat Calvert's, Kim's, maybe Issa if you if you are really working hard enough funding it, and the 3rd district right here, which is generally left trending. It did flip, but that was after another redraw, so that was a bit complicated. But it's a left trending district in general. If you look at the popular vote, it shifted 6 points to the right, but it only went from 7.3 to 10.9. So that's a generally left trending district on the outside of Nevada. It also makes sense considering these counties along this region in Nevada is also trending to the left. But these guys are trending to the right, so the Democrats are kind of in trouble as far as Nevada goes. They'll have to keep one eye on that. So now let's start actually filling out the map. How will things potentially go? What are the seats that they're going to want to hold on to? First off is going to be the biggest one, obviously. Jared Golden's going to need to win in Maine. He was able to flip the seat in 2018 by just over a point, right around a point, after Poliquin actually won by 9.6 2 years prior. That's a 10.6% shift. Very, very strong shift, and then he's managed to hold on for quite a bit. He narrowly won. His narrowest victory was in 2024. It's absolutely possible that he could win, potentially by over 5 points, again, come 2026, considering that in 2022, he managed to win by 6 points. Next up in New Hampshire, Maggie Goodlander's running for re-election. She should be able to hold on. Again, she won by 6 points. If it's trending to the left, then we should potentially be able to see her winning by more. Pappas is retiring. He is the stronger candidate out of the two. But this shouldn't be too difficult of a hold for the Democrats come 2026. That it's a more of a northeastern one as well. And generally, federally, New Hampshire goes blue. Hayes actually did a lot better than expected in Connecticut's 5th. I think that Democrats actually won't even really spend much time in this district. This is a potentially competitive one, and then it basically ended up being a whole lot of nothing. So I honestly think that they're not going to spend much time in that district, not a lot of funding, and I'm not sure that Hayes will need it. I think he'll easily be able to cruise to re-election as of right now. And we look at Staten Island, that is very likely just going to stay red. These two, Gillen and Swozey, are most likely going to be able to win re-election, potentially by just over double digits in a stronger scenario. Garbarino would probably be able to hold on, but the problem here is that this is where a lot of richer New Yorkers live, and that was one of the main categories that moved towards the Democrats. If you also look, she went from 11 to 10.4 when the popular vote in New York contracted quite a bit. So this is definitely actually a sleeper flip opportunity for the Democrats if they really focus on their messaging campaign, especially with how things are going. Especially depends on what happens in NYC later this year with that mayoral election, how tight things are on election night. But LaLota could absolutely lose if the Democrats are able to focus on their messaging and able to point out the unpopular things about the Trump campaign, especially considering that New York is also sitting at almost negative 25 approval rating, even minus 23 amongst 2024 voters. Lawler is definitely a very difficult opponent. He managed to flip the seat in 2022 by a very, very slim amount after that same seat went, not necessarily the exact same seat, but that area was probably on average about 20 points for Democrats. He won re-election by 6.3. Kamala Harris won this district. So he is a strong overperformer. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually does hold on here. but that is a potential flip opportunity. It absolutely will still be. Stefanik, if she stays in that seat, she should be able to hold on, probably relatively narrowly above 10 points. It's going to be somewhat close to that. I expect there's going to be a strong pushback in New York come 2026. Then it's probably going to go red again, a bit redder in 2028. Depends on the national environment and such. 20th district is not that competitive. It's really going to go blue by quite a bit. Same thing for the 22nd. He's now an incumbent, so that's going to make things a bit easier after they redrew the maps. Um, Riley by 2.2 is probably going to end up expanding by to a bit more as well. New Jersey is a bit more of a problem because it actually seems to be trending towards the right, especially over here. Donald Trump actually won the 9th district. So I think that Poe's probably going to end up managing to hold on by over 5 points, but not by that much. Conaway is most likely going to be able to win by more than 10, but probably less than he should considering the national trends that we're expecting. Van Drew actually might be, in theory, in danger just because looking at what happened in 2018. After 2016, there was a lot of red across the entire state, but then come 2018, every single one except for one of them flipped. And then they redrew the map. So the question is, how well will Van Drew be able to hold on here? I could see him winning either from anywhere from like 7 points to losing by 3. But as of right now, I'm going to put it down to like 4 or 5 points most likely. Smith is going to probably win re-election. That's the reddest district in the state. Here's one that I think that the Democrats could absolutely pick up is going to be the 7th district. Keene is a relatively strong candidate, but I do think that he definitely has weaknesses, and so depending on how well they do their messaging, especially with the richer New Yorkers, which are going to be a bit down towards the southern part, which isn't New York, obviously, but the Yonkers, outer New York City metro region area is going to be a large focus point if they get their messaging on point. Again, that's a lot of if they get their messaging right, which is a huge question for the Democrats, as I think it's relatively unbiased to say they relatively don't do all that well with. The easiest seat to flip here actually is going to definitely be the 10th. It's a left trending district. I could see this one potentially going by almost over 5 points. Back in 2018, managed to go by 2.6. These two flipped for the ex-incumbents, Cartwright and Wild, in 2018 after redrawn from whatever this is. But that general map is going to be. Oh, I misdrew that one. My bad. That's going to be probably more than 10, considering the fact that they won by 7.8. He's not very strong of an incumbent. 6.8 to 7.8. Even though the popular vote actually went quite a bit more towards Democrats, interestingly enough. But it was because there was no contest here, and Boyle did actually a little bit worse. But I think it's mostly actually the fact that there were contests here that gave them quite a bit more votes statewide. But anyway, McKenzie and Breshnan, most likely there's going to be a bit of a pushback. I wouldn't be surprised if these flip by just under 2 points, which would mean that the Democrats actually would have a relatively strong majority in the amount of seats in the House that they have. It lost a district, right? Okay, so I was just trying to figure out why on earth they said it was a flip. Maryland is basically going to be the exact same thing as always. It's a very blue state. That's going to probably end up being by over 10. Then you go with Harris, who's probably going to win by just under 15 points. Virginia is going to be interesting. When you get in out of the northern area, you have these two. They're relatively strong candidates. Most likely, expect they're going to win by just under 10 points. Give a safe margin over here. Kiggins is definitely going to be one of the more weak, potentially in danger Republicans come 2026, and I think they could definitely get her out from her seat there. Whitman actually might be, as well as McGuire, depending on who they end up putting up. But as of right now, I do see those two probably winning by somewhere between 5 to 10 points. Over in Kentucky, this is another one because Barr had some difficulties. Massey definitely did, but Barr, this seat actually did flip, almost flipped in 2018. He only won by 3.2, but now they redrew it. Most likely it's going to be completely safe. North Carolina is a gerrymandered mess. But even then, the Democrats do might, on a very, very strong surge year, might be able to push out some of these candidates or at least get the map quite a bit pink. I'm not really sure. It completely depends on who they end up running where, but they could absolutely end up showing up and completely blowing the Republicans out of the water. Or they could literally end up still having all these incumbents win by over 10 points. It completely depends on the environment in North Carolina come Election Day 2026. South Carolina is another one that's relatively uniform. I mean, it's not very, very red on quite a lot of spots. It's also somewhat gerrymandered. But 16 and 19, those are somewhat close. Those two potentially would go under 10 in a blue environment. I mean, 2018, it actually did flip for Cunningham, but then Nancy Mace flipped that seat in 2020. So then they redrew it to be a bit redder. So it's probably not actually going to flip even in a really good scenario for the Democrats. Florida is most likely not actually going to have any momentum towards the Democrats just because of how poorly they've done ever since the state flipped for Trump in 2016. The Florida Democratic Party has been basically any word that is a synonym for subpar. I expect these margins are probably going to go right back up to where they were, but potentially the only Republican that's really potentially losing is Luna because she's had some relatively controversial comments. But even then, I think she might be able to hold on by a point or two. And these ones probably going to get down below 10, but still hold on. These two are probably going to manage to win again by over 10, probably with slightly expanded margins. And this one's only 14, but I expect these probably actually going to be able to hold on by more than 10. Even though Jacksonville is actually a little bit left trending. And then Alabama, though both of those are relatively blue districts. Figures won by 9.2. Now you have an incumbency advantage as well, so that's going to really help in that regard. So, next up, we're going to be going up the coast since we don't have anything else to look at down in the south, really. We're going to be looking at Ohio. So, what we're going to be seeing is assuming that they still don't get any other agreement. So, that's probably going to end up being relatively close. 18.4. The House moves quite a bit. So, what you see, a lot of these 2018, I mean, even this one was 4.2 when the cycle prior was 37. So, that's a relatively large one. Plus here, you also have 18 all the way down to 4.4. It completely depends on who ends up contesting it as well. If you have really strong candidates, then it can really change things. So after this fixed map, then we go over to this one. This is definitely another sleeper flip. Is going to be the 15th district. It's somewhat left trending. I think if Democrats really put their focus into it, they can get some of these left trending areas as well. The area around, first that's Cleveland, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati. Yes. So the area around Cincinnati is really going to be somewhat left trending. Then you have Sykes, who's probably going to be able to win re-election by expanded margin. Miller's probably going to have a somewhat more difficult time. There's going to be more left trending areas there instead. And then Captor is probably going to win by more of a 2022 margin. Not quite that far, most likely, but this region is somewhat red, so they'd probably try to gerrymander her out, but who knows. Indiana, most likely that's just going to end up going up above 10. Irvin doesn't do poorly, I guess. Sports, if you look back all the way, even there, still 13.5 points. That one was 10. So, if anything, I think most likely this district would be the one to break down, but that's already 21. So, I think maybe this one could get down relatively competitive. Depends on, again, who ends up running mostly. Michigan, the Democrats have a very strong chance to flip a seat. John James is running for governor, and so that's really going to open up that possibility for the Democrats. That could potentially end up going up to 10. I didn't mean to click the other one. The seventh one, Barrett could potentially lose. That would be a good flip opportunity. Zinga by 11, that would be a good sleeper flip, most likely. But then the real question is going to be how well do they do in Michigan's 10th? Because that's going to be a testament to how well they do with the working class going forward. after all of the events. Schulten probably going to be able to win re-election. No, they don't have the little bubble on there. Okay. Um, and then you go into the 10th district. If they actually end up managing to flip this one, that would be relatively interesting. But that would be a main checkpoint for the Democrats, because then you could also potentially make inroads just along this entire Erie belt. They could potentially start getting more competitive in the 16th. That would be strong signs for flipping the 8th and the 7th in Pennsylvania. Potentially making inroads in the 14th district in Ohio. Get all of these more down in Wisconsin, which is where we're going next. Basically, the entire map is somewhat competitive. I mean, Tiffany by 27 isn't that competitive, obviously, but we're looking down Grothman by 22. Van Orden has defied expectations this time. He managed to win by 3.7 against incumbent Pfaff. Or no, Kind. And then Pfaff was trying to take the seat, failed to. So, but now Van Orden didn't do as well. Did relatively well, actually. The popular vote was quite a bit more towards Republicans or quite a bit more towards Democrats, and he managed to hold on by 2.7. So, really strong performance, but he could definitely still go down. He's had more controversial comments somewhat recently, so he could potentially lose by around up to 5 points. Y could probably end up. He's probably going to win re-election. Door County's left trending in Wisconsin. This General Bay area, that entire that trio right there voted for the liberal aligned candidate. But it's a bit more interesting to see how that might end up going, how the state of Wisconsin might end up staying competitive. This is going to be one that I think will be also very interesting. It's going to be Wisconsin's first district. If they can flip this one, that's going to be huge for potential turnout in Milwaukee and this general area, Madison, as well as Chicago. Because that's going to be a bit more of the working class heavy stuff that the Democrats used to win as well. If we look at the presidential map, going back to 2012, these counties were seen in Kenosha. Walworth was only by 12.3. Those were blue. Now they both flipped. They continued to go towards Trump, and they have actually moved towards Trump both times. Racine by 4.4, only actually to 4.1, but then they went by 6.2 each. Walworth 19, Romney by 12. So this area has been trending red, but they could absolutely end up making making inroads here. So that would definitely be a potential flip, especially considering the fact that it was 8.9 to 10.1 is relatively strong. Just want to make sure that you don't have something like in 2020 where he won by 18. You get a relatively strong candidate in there, and that's absolutely interesting flip opportunity that could potentially take everyone by surprise. These two districts are actually relatively safe at this point, just because it's gerrymandered that way, unfortunately, again. The second district would be an interesting one to see. It was relatively close back in 2018, but since then it hasn't really been. But it was only 12 points. So if the Democrats get the right person in there, plus they get the right messaging campaign, obviously, they could definitely potentially flip this one even by almost up to 5 points. Now I'm gonna just hop over to Nebraska real quick. This is interesting. Bacon's retiring. If the Democrats know what they're doing, they could easily flip this by over 5 points. Flood is potentially could only end up winning by a little bit. It's a very left trending area. Iowa is probably not going to be as blue as it was in 2018. I don't think the Democrats will win the congressional vote in Iowa, but I think it's going to be relatively strong for them either way. I think it's probably going to be close to about a 2020 numbers. The question is, where will those votes be? Miller Meeks literally won this election by, I think, 8 votes. So that's definitely going to be interesting for the Democrats to see how well they do. 34, I think, is going to get quite a bit more narrow. That is J.D. Scholten, who is running for, I believe, Senate. But we're going to be looking at Miller Meeks. That's definitely going to be a number one flip opportunity for the Democrats, as well as Zach Nunn. And so both of those are potentially going to be flips. I'm not sure about Hinson. Hinson seems to be doing relatively well. I think that it might be a bit closer, but it's not going to be necessarily a prime flip opportunity for the Democrats here. Going up to Minnesota, all of these are most likely going to get quite a bit closer. This is actually going to be prime movement for the Democrats, not necessarily where they're going to be flipping any seats, but they could potentially end up getting close enough to be able to potentially flip one of these two. Um, if it was either one, then most likely it would be this one because it actually had been relatively close before, even in 2020. Plus, this was actually Tim Walz's seat, so Democrats have held it before as well. Um, so that's probably the one that's more likely to flip out of the two. Going into Colorado, the best thing for Democrats would actually be flipping every single seat here. It's a very, very left trending state still. But that's relatively unlikely. Most likely could potentially see something like this. Boebert could potentially end up getting taken out by using her more controversial statements. You end up having a flip in the 8th district, get the incumbent. A rematch generally isn't that good, but Caraveo and in this scenario might actually be the best pick for the Democrats. And then Hurd could potentially lose by quite a strong margin as well. Probably not as insane as Caraveo might be able to flip that seat back for, though. But still a relatively strong amount, and then you end up having a relatively blue map at that point. And now, just like that, Democrats are up to 212. They only have 3 more seats before they are now competing with where they are currently. And with that, speaking of 3 seats, we then have these 2 in New Mexico, and then most likely this one's going to be relatively strong margin. Probably going to be end up getting more than 10 by the end of the cycle here. New Mexico's second in for 2026, which means that they are now at 215, which means that now they are going to be gaining seats with every single seat that they have, including a few that they do hold currently on the West Coast. They are knocking on the door of a majority. Popping down in Texas, because I almost forgot it. Again, this is without the potential flips here. We have Gonzalez, who's likely going to win by over 5 points. That's probably going to be a contested seat right there. That they're probably one of the ones they're trying to draw out. De La Cruz is probably going to win by just under 10 in this situation, and then Suellar is probably going to win by just over 10. Not by all that much, though, but, excuse me, but, probably just enough over 10, being able to get back some of that support. Some of those counties actually did flip for Donald Trump, including by up to 20 points. So that's going to be a relatively difficult task, but that's definitely going to be a sign on how the Democrats might be able to do with those groups in the future. And now we are finally up to 217, which means that if the Democrats get one more seat, they will take the House majority. So Arizona is going to be next. Holding on to Arizona's 4th right here is going to be crucial. Obviously, Stanton winning by a bit less than that. Hamadeh, that's going to be a bit of an interesting one. Hamadeh being able to flip that seat, that's going to be an interesting one. Northern Phoenix, that's one of the regions that did kind of move. I don't have any sub county stuff, so that doesn't really help. So that area is going to be a bit difficult to flip, as well as the 9th district's basically safe. But any big seat might be an interesting one to see. Most likely, whoever takes that seat over is going to only end up winning by just under 10 points. I mean, considering the seat itself actually, I mean, in 2018 it was 18.8 for Andy Biggs. Now it's at 20.8, so it barely expanded, even though it was redrawn. Ciscomani's seat is definitely going to be one that the Democrats are going to be focusing on. I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to flip it. One that I would be surprised would be Crane's seat. Honestly, I think that one's going to be a bit more strong for the Republicans. And then Schweikert's seat's definitely going to be another one they're going to be focusing on, is that northern region over there, which means that Democrats will take the majority, currently at 219. But this is a bit more of the Democratic best case. I'm not really looking at any specific information yet. Most likely Utah, that one's going to probably stay by just over 10 points. It's going to be a relatively large loss of margin. Montana tends to go pretty crazy when they actually start going blue. If you look at 2018, for example, you have quite a bit of a That's not what I meant to do. I wanted a map. Um, wow, apparently it doesn't give me a... There we go. Now is within 3 points or so. It's relatively blue. If you look at the presidential map, that's relatively blue. So when it tends to go blue, it goes pretty blue. For example, I mean, even in 2022, Zinke only won by 3.2. That margin closed on both sides. It was actually because Downing did a bit worse than Rosendale. But this seat, I definitely think, could potentially flip if the Democrats are able to focus on what happened, which is really going to be interesting in a sea of red around it. Um, but that's definitely one of the less likely ones to flip. Zinke does relatively well there. He's able to get messaging down, from what I can tell. He basically single-handedly is the reason that their margin improved in the state of Montana. So that would be an interesting one to see. Schreier is probably going to win re-election come next November. Randall's going to win most likely by over 10. And then you have Perez, who's most likely going to win by over 10 once you end up having um, a stronger incumbency. You're going to have a better blue year, et cetera, et cetera. Oregon, most likely this seat's going to end up staying blue, probably by a likely margin, just because now you have the incumbency status. Then I'm actually going to go over to Alaska so we can finish with California. If, as of right now, there's no reason that Bigich actually won't win, because Peltola isn't running. Now, if you end up having a really, really strong candidate like the other Bigich, who I'll explain, he's basically the same. He's actually, I think he's actually Nick Bigger's uncle, I think I read. So that's going to be an interesting one that could potentially make it a bit closer. He, I think, was actually a senator from there a while ago. But unless it's another recognizable Democratic name like Mary Peltola, who decided that she's likely going to run for governor, then we will actually not see that go blue again. And then we have Nevada. Most likely the Democrats will be able to expand their margins here. Basically, all of these are probably going to end up being safe. Not necessarily sure about the third district. It's actually pretty right trending. I mean, 4 points to 2.7. It actually got narrower. So, if anything, I think this one would probably right about stay, maybe go up to closer to 4 points. Modi does relatively well. I think, you know, um, that margin's potentially going to expand a bit more, if anything, but actually probably going to contract because it's a bit of a left trending district, barely, but that's going to be interesting to watch. And then we finally finish up in California. We have the red district there. That's actually a safe blue one. See, I'm already losing track of half of these districts. Harder's probably most likely going to win re-election now. Same thing with Gray. Now that you have the incumbency advantage. Same thing for Costa in that seat. Now, Valadeo does have incumbency, but it's going to be a blue wave year. So if Democrats are able to get things back down in California, especially considering how things were back in 2022, if you look at that 6 point shift to the right, which is really weird considering the fact that the Democrats actually netted 3 seats, which means they got more votes in the right spots. But you can see, for example, this seat got redder, 20.3 up from 22.1. 18.6, 20.7. So and a lot of these safe ones down in Los Angeles, Republicans did a lot better, so they actually netted in the vote in general. But going down Issa by 18.6, this is going to be a potentially competitive one. I think the Democrats will probably end up actually falling short just because of this region over here in general. Calvert might end up actually losing, though, just because it's already 3.4 points to start off. If you look in 2018, this area, Calvert by 13. Compared to the cycle prior, 17.6 is not much movement, but it only takes 3.7 points for them to lose. Kim is potentially at risk, but I really don't think that it's going to be, as concerning. Levin is probably going to win by over 5 points. Same thing could be said for Min, just because those are going to be probably continuing to trend towards the Democrats. Tran's probably going to win as well, probably by just over 5. Now you have the incumbency advantage. This seat's left trending. I'm pretty sure this one's right trending a little bit, but it was also a flip from 2022. which itself was actually a flip. So, if you look in, it's a flip. So it's a bit more complicated than that. But if you look at the 23rd district, that's around 20 points. That could probably narrow down quite a bit. I'm pretty sure that it was part of that 12.1 in 2020. 19.9 was between two Republicans, though, so you can't really gauge that. That's the difficult part about stuff like that. If you look at the that's actually a safe blue district. The 27th district, most likely white sides, is going to actually end up winning by double digits, just because then you again have that flip. You have the name recognition. You see Hill even flipped this seat from 2016 to 2018. Interestingly, lost it in 2020 by a very narrow amount, and then Garcia managed to hold on to it, and then Whitesides flipped it. But most likely, Whitesides will be able to hold on to it this time around with a bluer environment. McClintock 23.5. That's most likely going to stay right over 10. And to finish things off, Kylie. This is potentially a sleeper flip here with a blue trending area around it. So that's going to be very interesting to see, but they could potentially end up holding on. Depends on how well Democrats do in Eastern California, because they're probably going to be focusing more on these districts in SoCal, as well as Valadeo's seat over here in the 22nd district, not so much on the 3rd. So that does finally conclude our map here, 238 to 197, which actually is I think that actually is a 235 to 199. That actually is a bit better than 2018. It is absolutely possible, but that is with quite a bit of overperformance in some areas like Ohio, as well as Missouri, some of these less conventional states that there probably won't be thinking about spending money and resources in. But so most likely instead it's going to be something more along the lines of something quite a bit narrower than this. If anything, that's potential flip opportunity. You have a few down in California, all across Pennsylvania, which is probably mainly what they're going to be focusing in the Northeast. So if I actually did have to guess, most likely that's going to be one they're going to be focusing on. They might end up focusing on that one depending on how the polling numbers go. They're going to be pouring money and resources into Golden Seat. They're not going to be focusing on southern New Jersey, though. They're going to be focusing all in the Northeast. I guarantee you they're going to be focusing on Golden Seat, holding that. They're going to focus on holding New Hampshire. They're definitely going to spend money in Connecticut anyways. All across here, these four, as well as Lawler's seat. And then into these three in Pennsylvania, the 1st district in Pennsylvania, New Jersey's 7th, as well as holding New Jersey's 9th. So, they're also going to be focusing on Iowa because of how well things went in 2018, but I think it's going to be a bit less effective this time around. But here's, in theory, a potential map that we might end up seeing, or if Democrats actually get their game together, they could potentially end up getting a few more flips in some of these seats that might not have expected. But as of right now, this does seem like a better case scenario for the Democrats. Not the best case scenario. They could flip quite a few more if they really spread out their time, their resources. But this is probably potentially what could happen if a good way for Democrats to be able to take control of the U.S. House by quite a bit as well. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. We're going to be getting into the taking control of the Senate, which is going to be much more difficult. Honestly, I think them taking control of the Senate is probably about as likely as seeing this map, though, because this map is just a bit extra. But thank you all again so much for watching. Have a fantastic rest of your day.